Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do 4 cards today using the Hero Arts June kit. I just love this kit. This is the kit that had the safari animals. I did purchase the extra ombre ink in the Serengeti, which is what I used to make the moon for the first card. So this is a great, I love Hero Arts ombre inks. So all I did was just took it and rubbed it straight down to give that ombre effect. And then I ran the dye through my die cut machine, which I did off camera. There are a lot of things in this video. It became kind of long, so there's some when I was editing, I skipped a few things just for time's sake, but nothing of importance, and I'll let you know if something kind of jumps a little bit. So what I decided to do for this background was to use Elizabeth Crafts glitter, and I'm using the 608 Champagne Gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my card base or my card panel through the Creative Station Light, the Xyron Creative Station. So I'm going to run it through, and what it's going to do is make that entire panel sticky. So when I peel off the top sheet and get to the stickiness, then I have a complete panel of sticky that I'm able to put my glitter onto, so it will be able to stick. It's just the easiest way I found to do it. I really have found that I'm using the Xyron Creative Station a lot more lately, and you can buy different cartridges to go with it. So you can buy adhesive that is not permanent. You can do magnet paper. There's all kinds of things you can do with it. It really has become worth the money for me. And I'll put a link below if you'd like more information on it. So I've set my panel on a sheet of paper, and I'm just using the Champagne Gold glitter, and I'm scooping it out with a spoon. So that whole entire front panel there is sticky. Now, what you're going to see when I get it covered in glitter and pick it up is there's a few little spots that didn't get sticky completely, because one of the steps that I forgot was to take my bone folder before I pulled that sticky sheet off and go over it really well to make sure the entire panel had the adhesive on it. So I'm going to have to strategically place a few things on my card to cover those up, but it wasn't that big of a deal. And I like leaving that stuff in because it really helps you to see that we all make mistakes. We're all kind of fumbling through this. As much as I would love to be Jennifer McGuire or Christina Warner, you know, I'm just not. So I still make so many mistakes, and I'm sure they do as well. So I wanted to just leave those in and kind of show you how I fixed it. So I've got all the glitter on it now, and you can see the 3 dots at the top, and then there's an area at the bottom, and I'm actually going to flip that panel around so those dots are on the bottom. So I'm going to clean up my mess and put my glitter back in the best I can. This glitter does tend to stick a little bit to the paper, and I've tried to use my Ranger craft sheet. I've used a sheet of paper, and it sticks, so I've just I get what I can off and move on. So now that I have my panel, one of the things that you want to do after you use this glitter is you want to take your fingers. I'm using my Swiffer to clean up the glitter. If you haven't watched any of my videos, Swiffers are wonderful. They will get all that glitter and embossing powder up so easily. So I'm taking my fingers and I'm just pushing in that glitter and making sure that there's no extra laying on top, because what you don't want is for the recipient of your card to get the card and then all this glitter falls out on them. So most people don't enjoy that, myself included. So I'm also taking my bone folder and going back over it again just to make sure all of that glitter is really into the paper and it's in the sticky. So now that I've got that done and I've re-wiped my little area, I'm gonna go ahead and actually there was a couple areas I noticed that looked like some glitter was coming off, so I'm gonna go over it again. Okay, so now I'm gonna place my setting sun on here, and this is where I'm trying to place it so I can get it over where those little white dots are, where the sticky didn't come through the paper. So I want to make sure I've got that covered. So I've got my moon situated, and I still need to do my sentiment as well, which you can see down there on the bottom. And what I use for that is black licorice from Lawn Fawn, and the actual tag is from My Favorite Thing fishtail flag frames, and I love those. If you don't have those, check them out. They were inexpensive. There's 3 different sizes, and I find myself using them a lot. So what I decided to do, where some of that area where the adhesive did not get on the paper, was to trim it down. So what I did is I trimmed 1/4 inch on 2 sides of my panel, one horizontally and one vertically, so that way when I put it onto my card base, it will be even. So I know where I'm going to place my setting sun, and I just need to put that on there. And I'm actually going to use 3M foam tape to pop that up. I wanted to give the card a little bit of dimension. And I've decided that I'm going to stamp. There are several sentiments. One of them that I'm going to stamp for this card is the Hakuna Matata, which we all know from The Lion King. So I decided to heat emboss that. I'll show you here in a moment. And I apologize, my mat was moved down a little lower. I moved to where I do my filming, and so I realized I really need to push my mat up a little further in my videos, so I apologize that some of it is a little low. So this is the fishtail flag I was telling you about from My Favorite Things, and I'm going to heat emboss Hakuna Matata, and what I'm using is the Ranger Orange, and I love this Ranger Orange. I'm a big fan of orange, but this is just such a great vibrant color, and I never have any issues with it going off onto other parts of my whatever I'm trying to emboss, because some embossing powders I find no matter how much I use my powder tool, it still gets all over, and I end up having to take a paintbrush and get all of it off, and I never have any issues with this Ranger Orange. So I'm stamping it using the Versamark watermark stamp, and I'm going to go ahead and put my embossing powder on, and I am warming up my heat gun, which I think I kind of pulled into the shot earlier just to show you. What I do is when I'm getting ready to stamp with the watermark, I will go ahead and turn my heat gun on. And I do use the Wagner heat gun, and I will say there are a few things that I have found trial and error in crafting that are definitely worth the investment, and the Wagner heat gun is one of them. I would get frustrated with embossing. It would warp my paper. I could never get it to melt very well, and I finally, Joann's actually had it 50% off, so I finally broke down and got it, and it was one of the best investments I've made in my crafting, because it makes a huge difference. So I'm going to adhere my panel to my card base, and I'm using a card base from the kit. It's kind of like a shiny iridescent pearl color, and it's really hard to see on the camera, but it really works really well with the glitter from the background. So I'm placing my sentiment, and I'm also going to use foam tape to pop that up as well. I'm just putting it down in the corner. I probably would have moved it up a little higher, but remember I'm covering up some adhesive mistakes, so it ended up looking okay. So that is card number 1. And card number 2, there's a sentiment that's called Hippo Birthday to You, and I love the sentiment. I knew I wanted to do a card with this one. So you'll see I have an Avery L black card base there, which I intended to use for this card, but I completely forgot it was sitting there and ended up putting it on a white card base, as you'll see. So what I'm showing you there is when Hero Arts sends a kit, and I talk about this in my unboxing, which I'll link below, they always send a ribbon. Everything's wrapped in a ribbon. So the ribbon this time is almost like a paper if you unfold it. So I'm going to unfold that and use it as a edging on this one. So it's really hard to see here, but what I did is I took a pencil and a ruler, and I created almost like boxes across, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the Hippo Birthday to You and the hippo, and I'm going to stamp them up my paper. I cannot keep things straight, so for me it was easier to go in and create the lines. And I'm going to stamp 3 of them, and then I'm going to switch them and emboss and then stamp 2 more. So I've stamped the one, and I'm going to speed it up pretty fast, as you can see now, to do the other ones. Now I will slow it back down when I get to the heat embossing. So what I did is the Hippo Birthday to You, I just moved all the way up on the left side, except for that one in the middle, and then the Hippo on the right. So once I've got that done, now I'm going to use my Versamark, and I'm going to heat emboss with the black embossing powder that came with the kit. So I have to say, I was a little curious about how this was going to work, because myself, as with most crafters, I don't have black heat embossing powder, because if I want something black, I just use black Memento ink, Versamark ink, or VersaFine ink, and then I clear heat emboss it. So I liked the black embossing powder. As you're going to see the couple times I use it, you have to put a couple coats on. I think you get a more bold, vivid look when you just use black ink and clear embossing powder. So would I actually purchase black embossing powder? Probably not. However, having it with the kit and being able to try, is nice. And they sent a large amount of it. So an embossing powder lasts forever. So I heat embossed those two in the middle, and I wanted to reverse it just to kind of make it stand out, so that way they would know, could be able to see it. So I'm going to heat emboss that, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to erase my lines. And the eraser that I'm using, sorry, let me grab that, is the Mars plastic eraser, and I think I got this on Amazon, possibly from Simon Says Stamp, but I've seen them at Hobby Lobby, Joann, so you can get them anywhere. Great eraser, works really, really well. So I've got my stamping, my heat embossing done. I'm finishing erasing my lines, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply that paper ribbon. So I've spread it out, and I'm just going to put one down each side. And I decided that instead of cutting it off, I wanted to wrap it around. So I take my ATG gun and I run it down the back, and then just fold it over, as you can see me doing here, fold it over and tape it down. I decided I wanted to do that to stop it from the chance of it coming up, because it is pretty thin paper, so I didn't want to put a lot of adhesive on it. And it seemed to work well, and then I just folded down the top and the bottom and did the same thing. So I'm going to do the other side and then attach it to my card base. And as I said, I intended to use that black card base sitting up at the top, but I grabbed a white one, and so that's where it ended up. It still came out fine because of the edging with the little animal print. It looked fine on the white card. You really couldn't even tell it was sitting on a white card base. So that is card number 2, Hippo Birthday to You, which I thought came out so cute, one of my favorites. Okay, card number 3. This one is a shaker card, and I love to do shaker cards, and I knew how I wanted to do this in a roundabout way. I knew I wanted to do a circle and have animals and some of the stamps going around it. You'll see up there at the top, what I did is I cut a circle from some packaging, the packaging that came with it, intending to use that as the background, which you'll see later I actually do not use. So what I'm doing now is I'm using Distress Oxide inks. I'm first using Fossilized Amber, which is what I'm putting on right now, and then I'm going to move and put a Spice Marmalade over that. And if you have not used Distress Oxide inks, they are fabulous. I used to get so frustrated with trying to blend just regular distress inks. I would watch videos and they would do it so well and it would blend great. And I'm kind of heavy-handed, so I really struggled. The Distress Oxide inks, because they stay a little wet, they smooth beautifully. And I'm also using a Bristol Smooth cardstock here, which helps, and that's something you can order online. You can also pick it up at Michael's, Joann's, Hobby Lobby. I know Michael's has been running buy one get one 50% off, so it definitely helps with the process of smoothing it as well. So I didn't go over with the the spice marmalade everywhere. I wanted to leave some of that yellow showing. So I'm going to wipe up my Ranger mat, and I'm going to spray this. Because it is the oxide ink, I wanted to give it some depth to it, so I sprayed it. And I actually had the acetate still in there, which I should not have done. I put it in there first, and I removed it because I needed to stamp the animals, and I couldn't stamp them on top of the acetate. So what I'm doing here, and I sped this up as well, I am just going through picking stamps randomly and just circling them around. What I loved about the stamp set is there's some really small stamps, there are some larger ones, so I could fill in a lot of the holes. And I'm actually using the wine ink that came in the kit. I love this ink. Actually, I love it so much that when I was going through my inks over the weekend, I realized that I had bought a full one, and then I had also bought a mini cube, and now I've got one in this kit. So I have 3 of them. But it is a great color. It's a very crisp, dark color, as you can see on the card. So once I've got it stamped up, and I stamped it a couple times, which is why I used my Misty. The Misty was so fabulous to use for this. I had some areas on the bottom where I couldn't quite fit all the stamps in together, so I'm just going back in and filling those in again. I'm going to ink up the other stamps and stamp them on. And I had one more little space next to the lion on the bottom that I was trying to figure out what to put in there because I didn't want the stamps to overlap. So I finally found, I believe it's a little monkey, and stuck him in there, and he worked well. So I've got all of my animals stamped, and it did stick. It actually worked out okay because I had that acetate I pulled off. It helped to keep my panel onto my Misty. So now I'm going to add the acetate. And the acetate that I use the Starlar Graphics, and I got this at Michael's, I want to say 2 years ago. It's 25 sheets. It was kind of expensive at the time. I thought it was about $10 or $12, but I have had it for years, and I don't even think I've used 3 sheets of it. It is so worth it, and it lasts forever. It's a very thick paper. It's 9 by 12. So this is where I'm looking, and I've got that background that I cut out, and I decided I just didn't like it. It didn't really go with the animals, so I decided to pull that out and just take the card base. So what I'm going to do is take my spice marmalade and just do a circle over it, a really light circle where that's going to show through, and I just use that for my background. I wanted something simple. The card was very simple. The animals were just shadows, so I wanted to make the inside of the shaker very simple as well. So I'm going to create the backing of my shaker, and I'm using the 3M foam tape. And what I've found, and I've got this trick from so many crafters online, is to take the backing off of it, and then you can work it around in the circle easier. I used to fight with this tape, and finally I would just end up doing a square, but this makes it so much easier. So I'm actually going to pop this up 2 layers because I want my sequence to have room to shake around in there. And then I go ahead and I pop up the rest of it. So the sequence that I'm using are the Pretty Pink Posh Marigold and the Pretty Pink Posh Mini Sparkle Flowers. I really wished I would have had some type of maroon or darker color, and I just didn't have any in my sequence stash, which now I know I need to get. So I'm adding that in there. And one of the things you'll notice that I did is I take my powder tool and I use it on my spoon and also around the inside to get rid of any sticky actually on the shaker card. But that keeps the sequence from sticking to my spoon and having that static. So I'm going to put my back panel on. You see, I think it looks so much better to have just that plain orange with the spice marmalade as opposed to the cutout that I had. So I had die cut before I started the video a couple of those fishtail sentiment and from my favorite things, and so I'm just going to use another one, and I'm going to put Hakuna Matata on this one as well. I just felt it went, there's one that says be brave, and I almost put that one on there, be brave or be strong, one of the two, and be strong, and I decided to go ahead and go with the Hakuna Matata because of the animals. So I heat set that. What I did is I used the wine ink to match it up with the animals, and then I just used a clear embossing powder over it. And I'm going to take the little flag and use my Oxide, the Spice Marmalade, and Fossilized Amber again on it. So the first time I stamped this, I didn't like it, and I knew I didn't need much of the tag, so instead of cutting a new one, I just flipped it over and redid it again, and then I'm going to cut it off. Another one of those little mistakes that, you know, you just roll with it. So I flipped it over, now I'm just going to cut it, and now I've got a perfect little flag for my sentiment. So I am going to take that Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just showing you there that I used the Wow embossing powder for my clear embossing powder. Huge bottle. I paid $11.50 for it. I think I got it at a craft store. Will last me for years. So I'm going to take my Oxide ink, and I'm also going to spray this with water as well when I'm done, just to also give it that textured look. So I'm going to blend those two together, and I did do it a little bit lighter than the background I did on the card. I'm going to adhere this with some foam tape to give it some dimension and adhere it to my card base, and card number 3 is done. I use the ATG gun on all of my cards to put the bases on. You can really, using that, or I also will sometimes just use the Tombow runner. The ATG gun is pretty strong, however I sometimes fight with it, so really whatever the preference is. None of these were really that heavy, so either anyone would have worked. So I'm going to pop that up, and card number 3 is complete. I have to say this one is probably my favorite. So card number 4, I decided to play around with something I had purchased a while ago, and that is, it's heat resistant acetate. So I'm pretty sure I got it from Simon Says Stamp, and I'll link below. So what I did is I took a card panel and I used the Lawn Fawn stitch circle dies. There's the acetate there. And I just cut 3 circles out, and then I cut a piece of the acetate, the heat resistant acetate. And what's so great about this is you can heat emboss on it. It's not going to melt like regular acetate will. So I decided to take and basically do the same thing I did with the Setting Sun in the first one, and I'm just rubbing it down my card panel and not really doing it in any order. It's pretty random. You'll see it's a little darker in the middle, and I wanted it to look that way. I wanted it to be very random. So I'm going to put the acetate on the back to line it up, and then I'm going to pull it off when I actually do my heat embossing. So I saw this on a video that I watched a couple days ago using acetate, and she used a bounce dryer sheet. So that's what I'm using here to get the static, because you know acetate is so staticky, and when you're heat embossing on it, you need to make sure that you've really got that static cling gone, or your heat embossing powder is going to go everywhere. So I used that, and it worked really well, as you're going to see. So I decided to use the sentiment It's Been Too Long and use 2 of the giraffes. So I put 1 giraffe in each of the 2 circles on the left, and then I put the sentiment It's Been Too Long in the circle on the right. And so I'm using my Versamark watermark stamp pad and just stamping those out. Using my powder tool again just to make sure that area. This is the first time I had used it, and I was really concerned about that black embossing powder going all over. And I've got my last one, which is just a long giraffe. He kind of looks like he's looking at you. Of course, these are all shadow stamps. This kit was a lot of fun. There's actually a couple more card ideas I had that I may do as kind of bonus cards. So you can see the heat embossing powder is going right onto the acetate and sliding off. It's only going where I want it to go on. I was thoroughly impressed. It worked really, really well. So I'm going to heat emboss it. And once I get it heat embossed, then I can go ahead and put the front panel over it, over the circles. Now for this one, just have a little bit more control. I did use the Tombow tape runner just to adhere that, that acetate. I'm gonna add now in the kit was this great shimmery brown paper, and I decided to add it to the sides. So I actually cut this panel down. I think I took a 1/4 inch off all 4 sides, and then I put that brown shimmer paper on each side of the card. And I'm just gonna trim those off, and that's something that I actually cut off the film. I just used my it's late. I just used my cutter to cut those off. So I decided I wanted some type of background for them as well. So I directly on my card base, I used some of the fossilized amber and just put little dots of ink where I would have the circles coming through. You'll notice too that I keep all of my ink pads. I use Velcro, and I keep it actually on the bottom of all of my distress inks. It's just easier for me, so I know exactly where they are, because you do so much blending with them. I want to make sure I know, and it's worked really well for me. And then I have 3 of the tools, so then I can just pull the pads off, and then I don't have to have a tool for each one. So these are the 4 cards. We have the first one with the setting sun, the Hakuna Matata, the Hippo Birthday to You, just so fun, the shaker card, the little animals going around the circle in the Hakuna Matata, and then our heat embossed acetate that says it's been too long. So much fun. Don't forget to comment, subscribe if you liked what you saw, and don't forget to check out my blog. Have a great day.